This is Steve with the Laser Glade. I've made a bunch of lake maps over the years here, and I thought I would make a video on my process to kind of walk you guys through what I do and all the steps involved in making one of these three-dimensional bathymetric lake maps. It's kind of a complicated process, or at least involved. I don't know that it's super complicated, but there's a lot of steps involved, and I'll walk you through all of them, or at least some of them. If you've purchased an SVG file from us to make a bathymetric lake map, or if you're considering it, this video should give you a good overview of the process involved in creating it. Once the layer is cut out, I tape any of the insides that are cut, because all those inner pieces need to be glued to the layer below them.
So tape them to the lake cutout, and then they won't get lost in the Glowforge bed.
Much of creating these lake maps is just cutting multiple layers. So here I am loading the next layer for the next cut. Once that layer is done, I taped all the inner islands again. In this case I was using Scotch tape because that's what I had on hand. It was a terrible choice because it was really hard to get the tape off, and it also was hard to see, so not my preferred tape for doing this. I think the best tape for this is probably painter's tape or masking tape. I think I typically prefer the Scotch blue stuff just because that's what I had on hand, but
Anything except Scotch tape.
yeah, well, any of this clear stuff that you just can't see, and then when you try peel it off, it tends to rip too. Like it rips so easily. And this is the top layer. For this cut, I actually did them in reverse. So as I pulled them out of the Glowforge and stacked them, then they were in the proper stacking order. I did have a small issue with this one. There was a little spot up in that top right corner that didn't want to pop out. Sometimes you'll get this, and if you really have some voids or some glue or something that interfere with the cutting, you might have to, take a utility knife to it, or you might actually just have to cut a new, run a new piece through to cut that layer again. So I always tape all of my pieces before I load them in the laser and get it going. The peeling of the tape it's a pain, but after you peel the tape, there's no laser burn. You don't have to do additional sanding or anything. So I don't know, it's kind of pick your poison on this one. I typically always will use tape for this, but occasionally I'll do it without, but then you have to sand it all, and I don't know, that's almost just as much of a pain. So
There's some people I've noticed just leave the laser burn, but it tends to look a lot nicer if you either tape or else sand the laser burn away.
I've sped this up, but this took me about 15 minutes to peel start to finish here, from the top layer all the way down to the bottom. Hey, it's time for the glue up. So at this stage, I go around and apply some glue around the outside edging and then right along the inside edge as well. Taking care not to put too much glue on the inside edge, or when you squish them down, all the layers, you'll get some oozing of that glue onto the inside, and that can be a real pain to clean up.
If you do get some, clean it up with toothpicks and get after it right away. So once you have all the layers in place, get your Bessie clamp out and align all of the layers at the 90-degree corners before you clamp it, so that when you clamp it down, the glue doesn't cause the layers to shift, and the Bessie clamp will keep the corners nice and tight and the alignment of all of the layers correct.
I really don't think you can overdo it with clamps when you're gluing this stuff up. As you can see, I have quite a few.
Quite a few.
I could use
clamper pillar.
I could use more, to be honest. So after this is dried up a bit, and before it's too dry, I like to go around and just kind of chisel off these little bits, either with the chisel or else I'll just use something like this, just to kind of scrape off any squeeze out from the glue. But yeah, I might have to take these clamps off and get in there and just kind of get rid of any of this stuff, right? Try to make sure it's all nice and flat, because we need to put a frame on this. Hard to do when you have glue squeezed out the side. After the glue has set up, it's time to remove the clamps. You might notice I have some little wooden circles here on my lake map. I use those just to prevent marking from my clamps on the surface of the wood. Some of the clamp heads are pretty aggressive.
So let's add back some islands. Hopefully you taped yours to the piece. You can see here we are applying glue to the backs of the little pieces. Those are the islands or sandbars or whatever where the lake level comes back up. Apply glue only to those spots, and then you can see as we put the layer in, it should fit right where it was removed earlier. Once those islands are in place and the tape that is connecting them to that lake layer is gone, grab a utility knife and you'll be able to remove that excess cutout so that the lake depths will be visible.
Continue this tedious gluing process until all of the layers are complete. The entire inner glue up process took me about 20 minutes for this lake, maybe a little bit longer, probably about 30 minutes maybe. I also, for some of these uppermost layers, when the pieces get really small, I actually have a little piece of, I have some tweezers there that I will apply some glue to the bottom of the piece, and then I'll use the tweezers to drop it in place. Alright, I'm making an 11 by 19 frame. So I'll use my jigs I made to mark on my mahogany here that I'm going to use for the frame. So theoretically, if I did this right, I can just mark on this and cut pretty much exactly on these lines, and it will be the exact size of the lake map that I've made. So let's see. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I need to cut. I do rabbit cuts on these, so I need to go cut a 1/4 inch rabbit on all these sides, and that's why I made this little spacer, so I can just set this up against the fence and then rip it and get my rabbit cut. So here I'm just adjusting the height of the blade to be just a touch over a 1/4 inch. And then I'm adjusting the fence here to get my rabbit cut at the right distance in from the edge. And then it's just a matter of running all of the edge pieces through to get the initial cut.
Then I adjust the blade such that I can cut the rest of the rabbit and run them back through again.
There's my rabbits. Looks like they might be a touch big. Hopefully they'll work. Applying tape to the seams here ensures that the corners come together perfectly. So after taping all the edges, I flip it over, apply some glue on the inside seams, and then fold it all together with the tape, ensuring those corners don't come apart. And then after it's held together with tape, I use the Bessie clamp to really cinch it tight. And here I'm applying a staple to each corner to help reinforce the glue. After that, I go around and clean up any of the glue that may have squeezed out from the joints. Well, our frame is glued up and dried with our rabbit cuts on here. And it seems like it fits. So now we need to attach it. I ran a piece of tape around the entire outside of the frame. I'm going to be shooting nails into the side of the frame to hold it to the lake map, and I don't want any of the wood filler to get into the wood grain of the frame when I fill them, so that tape helps to prevent that. I'm going around and shooting nails in to hold the frame on, and then when that's done, I follow it up by using some mahogany wood filler putty to fill in all those holes. After the wood filler is dried, it's time to peel the tape off. After the tape is off, I run over the entire exterior of the frame with a sanding block just to knock down any rough material that might be poking out, as well as to knock down any of the wood filler that might be poking out a little bit, and just smoothing up the frame with a really high grit sandpaper. I also use my handheld sander mostly for the corners where any of the glue may have squished out, just to make sure I get all of that sanded down nicely.
Once it's all sanded down, I'll spray it down with polyurethane for protection. I typically give it a good 3 coats. So just 3 light coats. Between the second and third spraying, I'll sand it down with some really high grit sandpaper if there's any kind of grain rise on that.
After letting it dry for a while, your lake map is complete and ready for display.